Okay, so this is a podcast that we're doing called Inspire, and it is going to be a conversation with professors, a few of the professors at the University of Ottawa that are doing really interesting research right now. And today I'm talking to Natasha Bakht, Professor Natasha Bakht, who is going to tell us a little bit about herself, how she became a lawyer, a law professor, and a little bit about her research.
Well, I came to law school a bit later in life, so I only became a lawyer at age 30, but I think my life experience helped me in law school. For the last 10 years or so, I have been doing work in the area of religious freedom as it intersects with women's equality. So that has meant that I've been working on a variety of different issues in many different legal areas. But surprisingly, I've had to do a lot of work on women who wear the niqab, or the full face veil. And the way that I began to get interested in this area was I was doing some judicial education on demeanor evidence. So demeanor evidence is evidence that judges and juries can rely on, and it's evidence based on how someone looks or how they say what they say. And in my judicial education, I was trying to convince judges not to rely heavily on demeanor evidence, because the truth is you really can't know whether the perspiration on someone's brow is because they're lying, or because they have a thyroid problem, or because they're nervous because they've never been in court. So I've been doing that research, and then I heard of a very interesting case of a lawyer in England who wears the niqab, and she was arguing for her client, who was a Sikh client, as it turned out, and she was arguing in front of the immigration tribunal, and the judge couldn't hear her, and so he didn't say, "Could you speak up?" He said, "Could you remove your face veil?" And she said, "No, I won't remove my face veil." So he adjourned the case, and she was replaced by a lawyer, a male lawyer from her firm, the next day. And so because I'd been doing this work on demeanor evidence, which really suggested that judges, juries should not be relying on demeanor evidence, I thought to myself, why would a niqab-wearing woman pose a problem in a courtroom? And in this context, the lawyer is not being judged for the truthfulness of what she says. She's advocating for her client. Her client certainly didn't have a problem with her face veil. So that got me interested in the various roles that niqab-wearing women could play in courtrooms, and I started doing this research. And when I first started presenting in this area, I remember someone saying to me, "Why are you talking about this? Have you ever seen or heard of, other than this lawyer, a niqab-wearing woman in court?" And I said, "No, I haven't, but I bet it's going to happen." And of course, months after that, we had the R&NS case, which is a case that went up to the Supreme Court of Canada, in which a Muslim woman sexual assault complainant who wore the face veil wanted to testify in court wearing her niqab.
That's very fascinating. So you kind of mentioned a little bit of the response that people have had to your research, but maybe you can speak more about how people have reacted to your view on how niqab-wearing women are treated in the law, and the challenges of doing this research.
Sure. I think for the most part the work has been received very well. I think most people who I've spoken with have not had a conversation with a niqab-wearing woman. So there are a lot of misconceptions about who these women are, what the niqab stands for, a lot of ideas that it stands for radicalism, extremism, that these are women who are oppressed, who are forced to wear the face veil. So when I have been able to say, look, that's not what the research on niqab-wearing women in the West anyway shows, most of these women have said, actually I choose to wear the niqab, and if anything, I've faced familial opposition because my parents or my husband or whoever are worried about my security if I wear a niqab. And once we sort of unpack what the objections are that people have to the niqab, and you sort of see that most of the objections are very generalized, and can be dealt with with really specific measures and don't require total bans of the niqab in public spaces or even courtrooms for that matter. Usually I have found that people's responses have been very open. I wouldn't say that with judges. I would say that with judges I have gotten the whole gamut of responses. Many have experienced a lack of confidence in being able to assess someone's credibility based on demeanor. And so I think they've found what I've said to ring true to them. And others who have sort of clung tightly to demeanor evidence and who feel that being able to see the face is nonetheless useful. It's one more aspect of the demeanor package that they would like to have available to them.
And so you've spoken a little bit about what your research is focusing on and why you are doing it and the challenges. Can you give us a glimpse of what is the most exciting aspect of doing this research? What has really kept you motivated to work on this issue?
Sure. I think some of the most exciting, I guess maybe I'll just start with maybe the most disappointing thing and then move to the most exciting. The most disappointing thing that I'm seeing is legislative bans that are banning Muslim women from wearing the niqab in a variety of different contexts. So we have, for example, a new law in Quebec which says Muslim women, or actually doesn't say this, just says people who cover their faces cannot receive public services, and they cannot work in the public service. So, hugely detrimental impact on these women. It means they cannot work in a province where the public service is actually a huge employer, and they can't receive public services, so they can't access daycare, public transportation, healthcare services, unless they seek very onerous accommodations, and it's really not clear how those accommodations will be met. So that's been very disappointing, and Quebec is not an outlier. There are at least 6 or 7 other European countries which have banned the niqab in public spaces. So these women will be fined or jailed if they are seen wearing the niqab in public, and it seems to be something that's spreading. So more and more countries are debating the niqab and trying to ban it. So that's been very, very disappointing. And the European Court of Human Rights has upheld these decisions, which is also very disappointing given that it's a court to protect human rights. The most exciting thing has been to see niqab-wearing women's reactions and niqab-wearing women's allies' reactions. So people are speaking out about these bans and how unfair they are, how unjust they are, how they are contrary to religious freedom, to women's equality, to women's security. Very recently in Denmark, there was a ban of the niqab that was implemented on August 1st, and on the day that it was implemented, over 100 niqab-wearing women and their allies protested and marched on the streets. And that's the first protest of that kind that I've ever seen or heard of. And it was very exciting to see. They were writing letters to the editor and saying, what is the problem here? If there is a real need to criminalize, I think there should have been consultations, should have been adherence to human rights. And in that protest, a police officer who was supposed to arrest one woman actually stopped, talked to her, and gave her a hug. So that was really encouraging. And then an Iranian Danish designer in Copenhagen's Fashion Week had all of his models walk down the runway wearing niqabs and hijabs and reenacted this really heartwarming scene between this police officer and a niqab-wearing woman. So that is pretty unprecedented and unusual and very exciting.
That is truly exciting. That is incredible, storytelling right there.
Mm-hmm.
The final thing I wanted to ask you about is that not a lot of law students know that you also have another professional career, which is you are also a professional dancer.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if you could just give the students a sense of how you manage both of your careers and how they both feed into each other and stimulate the work that you do in both the artistic side of yourself and the very legal professional side?
Sure. So being a dancer and choreographer is what I did before I went to law school, which is why I went to law school a little later in life. And for me, dance art is really an important way to foster social change. So, and it also is a real balance for me. And I always tell my students that, don't forget who you are just because you're in law school. Don't stop doing the things that, excite you and interest you. So for me, I had to do that. I had to take that same advice. And while I really loved law school, and it was the first time in many years that I was learning something brand new, I decided that in my first summer I wasn't going to work in law and that I was going to do some choreography and some dancing. And so while I was in law school, the way that I balanced my dance and legal career was just to devote the academic year towards law and then my summers to dance. And now it really varies, but I find that if the scheduling works, I'm definitely happier when I'm able to do both law and dance. And I find that the stories that I'm interested in law, which are the stories of women, the stories of marginalization, of intersectional identity issues, those are the same kinds of stories that I'm interested in dance. So in many ways, it's just another medium with which to express the same sort of ideas.
Thank you so much for your time, Natasha. It's so inspiring listening to things I already know about you, but to hear it from your own voice. So thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.